Okay, so I know I always go on about this, but it's because no one else will. And it's because it's a really massive issue that everyone seems to be ignoring. The government, the judiciary, the media. Why is there not more outrage about this? There are literal criminals, violent criminals out on the streets, and they're not doing anything about it. Like, there are much less severe criminals in jails right now, and I don't understand how any of this is getting through the cracks. Okay, so this all went back to last year. Remember when I told you that 149 detainees were released out onto the streets because the judiciary said that it's illegal to detain people for an indefinite amount of time. I went crazy about that at the time because I knew what would happen. I knew that when you send out criminals onto the streets, and at that time we didn't even know what they had done, but the fact that they were in detention meant that they had done something wrong. If they hadn't, if they were squeaky clean, coming from a different country, just looking for a good life in Australia, they would be let out into the community and they would be functioning, productive members of society like every other asylum seeker and immigrant that comes from another country. But no, when you're in immigration detention, it means you've done something wrong, either back in your hometown or in Australia. So these people weren't good news. But of course, the weak and soft, incompetent judiciary doesn't look at any of that, and they sent them right back out onto the streets because apparently it's unfair. Poor snowflakes, unfair to keep them locked away. No, it's not unfair to keep people locked away when they've done something wrong, when they're criminals. And then in the subsequent days and weeks after they were released, it came dripping in. We kept hearing of these instances of these 141 asylum seekers being arrested for different things, ranging from breaking their curfews all the way up to sexual assault of minors. That absolutely broke me. I went into it on another video. I'm not going to go into it now again because I'm just going to get angry. So then mysteriously, the regular updates stopped, and I knew that there is no way that these people who were released just stopped offending, because you know what? It's in them. Of course they're going to reoffend. Criminals are criminals are criminals. So it was at that point that I did some digging and found out that the government had passed over the responsibility of updating the community about the reoffences from this group of people to the states and territories that they resided in. And they were not required to provide updates. It was only if the police force in those states and territories wanted to. So of course the updates stopped, which I think goes against public safety. If we're living next door to a criminal, or there's a criminal in our area, especially a violent, sexual, child abuse, any sort of that kind of criminal, we need to know about it and we need to be updated about it so we can make a decision on if we want to live there. Because as always happens, the police force, the judiciary, the politicians are always protecting the criminal and not the innocent, hardworking person. So finally, we got a bit of an update just yesterday about this group of delinquents. So just an update on how many have reoffended. 6 have been charged in relation to breaching visa conditions, and then another 18 have been charged in relation to an array of state and territory charges. Now, they don't go into detail about what that is, but it's different criminal offenses. Could be armed robbery, could be sexual abuse, could be domestic violence, drug offenses, any of those. So to date, from what they tell us, we've had 24 people of that group charged with reoffending. But you know how many have been either deported, put back in immigration detention? Absolutely none. Zilch. Nada. Australia is literally the only country where you can reoffend and be treated better than someone who's never done anything wrong in their lives. The obsession that judges have with keeping criminals out of jail astounds me. And these aren't innocent one-offs. These are hardened criminals. Let me tell you some more information that we've learned over the last couple of days. We now know why these criminals were initially placed in detention in the first place and not let out into the community like everyone else. This is disgusting. All right, so 7 were charged with murder or attempted murder back in their home country or in Australia. 37 were sexually based offenses, including children. That's 37 of the 149. 72 were charged with assault and violent offences, including kidnapping, robbery, armed offences. That's 72. 16 were charged with domestic violence offences, 13 were charged with drug offences, and less than 5 were charged with minor offences. Now, the government and the judiciary all had all of this information before. This didn't just come to light yesterday. They had all this information, and what did they decide to do? They decided to let them out. These people should be in jail. Immigration detention was a holiday for them. Why are they then let out onto the street when they are proven convicted criminals? Should their past not come into consideration? I don't care if it's unlawful to detain people indefinitely. There's a reason they're detained indefinitely, because they're unsafe to be in the community. And if they don't want to detain them indefinitely, then put them in jail. Better yet, send them back. But of course they're asylum seekers, so we can't do that. Although I'll hazard a guess that they were completely fine in their country of origin. And when the immigration minister Andrew Giles was asked about this yesterday, he passed the buck. He said there's a new body called the Community Protection Board, ironic name, that handles all of these things. So as always, the politician, even though it stops with him, he's the top of the pecking order there, he blames it on his staff. Now in December, the government also rushed through these laws that would allow the government to seek protection orders for those released who they think are a threat to the community. So when all of this was blowing up, they rushed through these orders, purportedly to look good and to look like they're actually doing something. But how many of those orders have actually been issued? Once again, zero, zilch, nada. And of course, the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese had an excuse for that. Today, he said there's an extremely high threshold that anyone getting these orders would have to, I guess, live up to, i.e. they have to be a really bad criminal. They would have had to reoffend in a really terrible way in order for the courts to apply these protection orders and to get them back into immigration detention. So he basically said there's no point applying for these protection orders if they're not going to get through. I mean, what can you say? The system is broken. It's absolutely broken. We've got a prime minister who's throwing his hands up because we have a judiciary who refuses to punish anyone for crimes, to keep our country safe. They also haven't been redetained because there's no prospect of resettling them somewhere else. Let me give you the list of countries that have knocked back these people so you can really see what kind of character they are. Bangladesh doesn't want them. The UK doesn't want them. Saudi Arabia, New Zealand, and Canada have all said no. They've said, no, we don't want these people in our country because they're going to cause chaos for us. And you know what? I don't blame them. Why would you open your arms and let into your country a violent criminal? And why am I the only one who is ever so angry about this? It boggles the mind how you can be a government and see a group of criminals coming to your shore and say, sure, come in. And then at the same time, I don't know much about this story, but I saw in the news today that there's this lady from the UK, she's like 70 something, has been in the country for like 40 odd years, and they're thinking of sending her back. What? Seriously? An old lady who has created a life, had kids, had grandkids, worked her whole life in Australia, contributed, and because of some clerical error, they're now thinking of sending her back. Yet, hardened criminals who continue to reoffend are allowed to skip everything, don't even go to jail, go straight out into the community, because these judges are so weak and limp-wristed, they don't want to appear racist. But when it's a white old lady, it's completely fine because apparently she's privileged. Okay, someone explain this to me. And I know this isn't just happening in Australia, this is happening all over the world. Borders are flooding open. Europe, Mexico, governments across the world are allowing asylum seekers into countries and compromising the safety of their citizens. It's completely unfair. There's got to be something behind it. Can I give the government a bit of advice? Cut the bureaucracy. Oh, and by the way, this entire debacle has cost tens of millions of dollars. Yes, tens of millions of our taxpayer dollars to free criminals into our society. Make it make sense. Save the money, save the admin, send them back. Just send them back to where they're from. If you commit a crime, you shouldn't have the privilege of being an asylum seeker. If you're a violent criminal, then you can stay in your country and you can deal with the consequences. But I'm sorry, if you're a violent criminal, you don't get to come to a safe haven like Australia and then mess it up like you did back in your home country. Bring us the innocent women and children of those countries who are genuinely being persecuted. But I think I speak on behalf of everyone in this country who says that we don't want these violent men coming in when we could easily have productive, joyful members of the world coming in and we can actually be saving them from a life of persecution. That's what providing asylum as a country has always been and should continue to be.